Hello, and thank you for attending this session on scaling to achieve impact from any technology and innovation. This work is joint work with Dr. Ajit Srivastava of Michigan State University, and what I'm going to talk about today was completed through a USAID grant that we received, and we worked on the grant with several countries. So this was a West Africa Innovation Hub, and the goal of the project was to scale appropriate scale transformational mechanization technologies to the West African region. Our mission was to develop and scale appropriate mechanization for productive and profitable enterprises for smallholder farmers in West Africa, and the vision was to create an innovation ecosystem in collaboration with stakeholders and partners supporting entrepreneurial activities leading to the development, adoption, and scaling of appropriate technologies through capacity building, women empowerment, and youth engagement. An example of a technology that I'm going to talk about in this presentation is a planter that was developed by the team in collaboration with local farmers. The team used a cropping systems approach to develop an improved planter which was specifically redesigned for minimally tilled soil. Now let's talk a little bit about scaling, which is the goal of this presentation. So what is scaling? Scaling aims to increase the use of a technology, such as in this case the planter, to impact a large group, and this objective measurement of the outcome of the technology can be measured in terms of land area like hectares, the number of people adopting the technology like farmers, or the number of the pieces of the technology in use. And the goal of scaling is that it should lead to a sustainable system-wide change. And the assessment of the impact is possible on its own without external intervention. That is, the technology is ready and is ready to take off even without any external support. Let's look at scaling levels. In the beginning, at the inception of any technology, what happens? Some farmers initiate the use, and these are usually the first movers. Gradually, influence groups emerge, and this is the influence stage of the scaling, diffusion of scaling of technology. Different initiatives gain momentum, and multiple influential groups are formed. This leads to the formation of a critical mass where multiple stakeholder pools and institutions realize the potential from the technology and formal initiatives are established. Finally, at the highest level of scaling, the technology is completely diffused and it's known as institutionalized, where the technology becomes a level playing field and the practices such as adoption of the technology are perceived as normal by stakeholders. So how we went about doing the scaling gap analysis is that first we assessed the gaps and then we got about to a strategy for scaling. So we developed some instruments to assess the level of knowledge about the technology. We identified target groups. We trained field agents. We translated our instruments. We pilot tested our instruments. We recruited participants. We conducted and discussions and collected data, we analyzed the data, and we developed action plans. So in terms of instruments, we developed two types of instruments. The TRA, the Technology Readiness Assessment, which is a quantitative tool that collects data from farmers about very objective metrics, like how many pieces of the technology are in use, how many farmers are using this technology. And then we did a second instrument, a gap analysis, which collects qualitative data from farmer users and value chain members. And these were translated into local languages. The target groups were male farmers, female farmers, youth, artisans, and blacksmiths, local political leaders, bureaucratic representatives from agricultural departments, farmer corporate representatives, local bankers, farm equipment suppliers, NGOs, and university representatives. Field agents were graduate students and project team members. Instruments were translated and pilots were conducted. The implementation occurred through the active collaboration of two facilitators, one facilitator to ask the questions and one note taker. Data for the gap analysis was collected in a focus group. The group consisted of 5 or 6 respondents, which were farmers and users. About 3 hours was spent in collecting each instrument of the gap analysis. Participants sat in a circle in a focus group discussion format. The facilitators made sure that everyone talked, and the goal was to get some degree of agreement on each question. So, who are the gap analysis respondents? These included farmers and value chain participants, including artisans and service providers. And the goal was to get in depth exchanges with people who are able to provide key information relevant to scaling and understand perspectives on scaling that can be difficult to quantify, such as perceptions and beliefs. So, here is a sample agenda where the respondents for the data collection included project team members, union leaders, farm association leaders, influential farmers. About 30 people participated in one such data collection venture. 30 minutes of introduction was provided with an overview of the technology. Some system dimensions and trade-offs were discussed. The gap analysis instrument filling was conducted after that. A debriefing and questions and follow-up questions were addressed. The total time was about 4 hours. So let me talk a little bit about the gap analysis instrument, since this was a new instrument that we had developed and we pilot tested this and then implemented it in the field. So the goal of our gap analysis instrument was to assess 3 types of gaps: technology gaps, human capital gaps, and institutional gaps. Let's first talk about technology gaps. In this, some of the things we were interested in learning is the technology relevant to farmers? If farmers do not believe that the technology is relevant, scaling is not likely to be very successful. Is the technology compatible with local needs and preferences? So if you come and just try to push through a technology that's not compatible with local needs, again, scaling will not occur. Does the technology reach, benefit, and empower women? We did a lot of work on this regard with respect to collecting data and analyzing some of the impediments with respect to gender. Is the overall performance of the value chain conducive to the use of technology? A technology can be scaled, but if there is no market for it, then the technology use is not going to lead to an improvement in the economic condition of the farmer. So that was the goal here. Are local resources such as land size, cropping pattern, service providers, operators, mechanics, spare parts, fuels, etc. sufficient for users? How do farmers learn about new technologies? How do they build trust to try it? Is there a market mechanism to support scaling throughout this technology life cycle? So for example, maybe the market can absorb a little bit, but will the market be able to absorb a whole lot of this technology? The next set of gaps we looked at were human capital gaps. Do potential users have capabilities to absorb the technology? Do they have an agricultural knowledge base to reap benefits from the technology? And do they have the business skill sets that are required for scaling success? Finally, we looked at institutional gaps. What is the economic affordability of the technology to current and potential users? Is there support from local and central government institutions to enable widespread adoption? Are there appropriate mechanisms to protect the property rights of owners and renters of the technology? And does the technology influence local power relations? I'm not going to go through the full 12-page instrument, but I'm just giving you a sample here of the questions we asked and how we determined whether scaling was easy, neutral, or harder. Here is an example. Is the farmer group well defined in terms of potential users? We said ask them to name a few users by name, ask if they can use the technology. And if they are able to name people or they themselves, then scaling up is easy. If they cannot name anyone, it's going to be really hard. And so we accordingly had many questions. As you can see, I'm not going to go through the questions, but I just want to provide you with an outline as to how for each question we had multiple questions. Now, finally, let me talk about the planter impact or outcome. 35 planters are in use, 40 more are being built. The productivity is really quite superb. With a planter, a family of 3 can accomplish the work of a hand planting crew of 15 to 20 people. Yield has increased by a range of 50 to 150%. There is phenomenal time and labor savings for women. Women now have more time for entrepreneurial activities, and it has increased the capacity of local artisans. Thank you very much, and I look forward to questions and comments.